Marvel's Phase 4 has destroyed the MCU and made it impossible for Phase 5 to reach the same heights as the Infinity Saga. It assassinates the original characters and world building, gives us a weaker foundation with one-dimensional new characters, and shows that Marvel has their future less planned out than a toddler or someone with a degree in the arts.
Fair change.
Now, you may be thinking to yourself, come on, it's Marvel. It can't be that bad. And oh my poor summer's child. I thought the same thing. So, over the course of 5 days, I rewatched everything in Phase 4 and realized that not only do I not have a social life, but this phase is not bad. It's a crime to everything the MCU used to stand for.
I'm sorry.
How is this possible? Well, sit back as I break down how Marvel destroyed the MCU.
And here we go.
Now, I think it goes without saying that following up the Infinity Saga was going to be a Goliath of a task. I mean, say what you want about those movies, but they are filled with great characters, world building, and some solid consistency between most of the films. Needless to say, it was very important for Phase 4 to respect what came before. So, naturally, the obvious direction to go was to burn everything to the ground.
Not a great plan.
From character assassinations to straight up retcons, nothing is safe from Phase 4's wrath. I mean, look at what the MCU has done to Black Widow.
This is gonna end well.
Natasha Romanoff was one of the most well-written and consistent characters in the MCU, and her sacrifice in Endgame was the perfect conclusion to her story. A once assassin who was always closed off and alone, finding a family in the Avengers, and eventually opening herself up to them, to the point where she was willing to sacrifice herself to bring that family back. Then her movie had to come in and screw everything up. For context, Black Widow takes place between Civil War and Infinity War, with the sole mission to bastardize this character. The whole movie is a retcon, giving Natasha this new family that she apparently has always had, including a sister that she never looked for, attempted to contact, or even mentioned to the other Avengers.
I used to have nothing, and then I got this job, this family, and I was better because of it.
Your secret whistle with Nat. She talked about you all the time.
Stop the cap. Why would you do this? Natasha's story has always revolved around looking for a family within the Avengers, because she has never had one. Hell, in Civil War, every decision she makes is done in hopes to keep the Avengers together. And you want me to believe that she would just never check in on her actual sister Yelena? It makes Natasha look like an uncaring ass to not make sure that Yelena escaped the torturing experience of being a Black Widow.
Where did you think I was all this time?
I thought that you got out and were living a normal life.
And you just never made contact again?
Honestly, I thought you didn't want to see me.
Bullshit.
I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's not like Natasha has been completely destroyed as a character by doing something absolutely unforgivable, you know, something heartless, like if in her last step to join S.H.I.E.L.D., she knowingly used a child to attempt to kill the leader of the Widows. Oh, wait a minute!
Natasha, we clear?
All clear.
God, you know, you couldn't leave Natasha alone, and trust me, she's not the only victim here. Thor is now an absolute joke, going from a tragic character who is still working through his trauma to a man who only cares about the next fight and whatever weird relationship he has with his hammer. Vision basically got revived into a new body, completely undermining his death in Infinity War. And don't get me started on Wanda Maximoff.
I made mistakes, and people were hurt.
But you put things right in the end, and that was never in doubt.
This guy is f***ing stupid!
Funnily enough, she actually had a great opportunity to become a villain for the MCU. I mean, if anyone would turn to the dark side, it'd probably be the person who lost her home, parents, brother, lover, and was the catalyst for both Age of Ultron and Civil War. Basically, Wanda was perfectly set up for a villain arc, And in WandaVision, she seems to start on that journey, where in her grief over Vision's death, she enslaves a whole town of people to live out this fantasy life with her and Vision like she's a puppet master. However, the problem is that the writers don't fully commit to making Wanda a villain. I mean, yes, she's a terrible person in this show, but they keep having the good guys try to justify her actions.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
What? What the fuck?
All this does is muddy the characterization of Wanda, because it forces the writers to try and justify the mental enslavement of a whole goddamn zip code. This is what happens when you just carelessly try to rework characters. If the change doesn't make sense or is inconsistent with prior characterizations, then you run the risk of ruining the character, something Phase 4 just could not afford to do. After Avengers Endgame, the next phase had to be a transitionary period, where the focus is set up on the main players moving forward. Obviously, this means a lot of changes, and familiar faces are the best way to keep people on board to see what happens next. However, if you keep disrespecting your returning characters, you're just going to alienate fans who want to see these heroes continue their journeys.
You just blowing from Stupid Town?
Then again, it also doesn't help that Marvel keeps retconning in groups and organizations that have apparently been a part of this universe for centuries. I mean, in Phase 4, we're introduced to the Ten Rings, which are a criminal organization led by Wen Wu from Shang-Chi, who have been around since about ancient China. Namor's Shut up. Namor's people from Wakanda Forever. They're basically ancient Aztecs that drank the same heart-shaped herb mixture thing that they have in Wakanda, but because their plant was found underwater, it gave Namor's people the biology to live underwater. Also the Clandestines from Ms. Marvel. These people are from another dimension and have been trapped on Earth for decades, and somehow never found a device they need to bring themselves home. Retcon and his group of mind control widows, who have been pulling the strings of history for generations out of this Death Star sized base that somehow has been kept a secret for decades. The TVA, who are literal time cops, and finally the Eternals, beings with godlike powers who have existed in the MCU since the damn Stone Age. Oh, but don't worry, they aren't allowed to interfere with human conflict. No. But they can help them technologically, agriculturally, spiritually, and probably sexually. Also, let's just ignore the one Eternal in particular that decided to leave the group because he couldn't sit by and do nothing anymore, and then proceed to sit by and do nothing about any of the supervillain disasters during the MCU, because if we don't, I might pop a blood vessel. God, this is the problem with retconning in all these groups. It leads to so many questions of why we haven't seen or heard anything about them up to this point. You can't have 10 different groups interfering with history and expect them not to clash at all. The funny thing is that I haven't even gotten to the biggest retcon, which comes from Loki. For context, the show follows the Loki from Endgame that escaped with the Tesseract. However, he ends up being caught by the Time Variant Authority, who are basically time-traveling cops whose job is to stop any changes in the timeline that doesn't coincide with the sacred timeline. Here, I'll let the clock cunt explain it to you.
Sometimes people like you veer off the path the timekeepers created. Maybe you started an uprising, or were just late for work. The TVA has stepped in to fix your mistake and set time back on its predetermined path.
This concept of the TVA and the sacred timeline may be the most disastrous concept that has ever touched the MCU. Why is this? Well, if any little change can lead to the TVA resetting the timeline, then that means up to and after Avengers Endgame, the MCU had no free will. No choice that was made was done for character reasons or after making a decision. Nope, everything was predestined to happen. Steve didn't crash the plane into the Arctic saving millions. The TVA stopped him from doing anything else. Iron Man didn't stop a nuke from dropping on New York. Nah, he just was destined to do so. Thanos didn't choose to collect all the Infinity Stones. It was just the only thing that could happen in the sacred timeline. This eviscerates the stakes of the entire Infinity Saga. The fact that the TVA mentions that the Avengers were meant to time travel according to the sacred timeline means that at minimum, everything that has happened before Endgame is more scripted than a YouTuber apology.
I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment.
Not only has Phase 4 not respected the past of the MCU, but it took the past, threw it on the ground, kicked it in the groin, and pissed on it, just to remind it that it's worthless.
That is one big pile of
Okay, well, as infuriating as it is that Marvel is ignoring the past more than a parent does their middle child, this new phase isn't just about the returning characters. With the loss of Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and Natasha, along with several other Avengers who are always conveniently off-world or retiring, Earth is gonna need some newbies for the roster, and Phase 4 introduced a truckload of new characters to lay the groundwork for this new period of the MCU. And I could safely say that all of them are boring. Yeah, I'm dead serious. Almost every new character introduced to Phase 4 is as interesting as Long Division or listening to your partner's day. What makes it funny is that it all stems from the same problem. That being, none of these characters go through an arc. They're the same people at the start of their movies and shows that they are at the end. Think about it. Shang from Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. What is his character arc? How does he change from the start to the end of the movie? Hell, even any potential problems that could be used to develop his character is ignored. Issues with his father turning him into a weapon, talked about in like one scene, then never explored. Potential guilt of not being able to protect his mother, not a thing. Even just a simple, hey, I want to do more with my life, is impossible because Shang is pretty content with himself and just gets thrown into this adventure. Having a character go through an impactful arc is essential to not only help them connect to the audience, but to also just make them memorable. Look at Tony Stark. His arc in the first Iron Man movie, where he is humbled and goes from a selfish asshole to a hero trying to fix his mistakes, is what made so many people get attached to the character in the first place. Shang and many other of the Phase 4 rookies don't go through something like that. For example, America Chavez from Multiverse of Madness. Her big problem is dealing with the guilt that she has of losing her parents within the multiverse because she couldn't control her power. Yeah, by the end she gains the confidence to somehow be able to go toe to toe with Wanda of all people, but all we get for her development is a pep talk from Zombie Strange. My man really just used Talk No Jutsu to give this girl a power up. Let's keep going. Riri Williams from Wakanda Forever. She's essential to move the plot forward, but is treated as a prop, only appearing when they need her to invent something or need Shuri to unload some exposition. Really, it's not the best setup for a character, especially considering she's supposed to be getting her own show. Cassie Lang from Ant-Man Quantumania. I know this is technically Phase 5, but f*** you, the rules still apply here. Gets next to no development with her dad Scott, and only learns how to use her supersuit more effectively by the end, because the MCU is going to need stature for the future for some reason. Hell, even Kate Bishop from Hawkeye. I like the character a lot, but the only difference between her from episode 1 and episode 6 is that she's now a slightly better vigilante. God, these changes are more shallow than a Puddle or She-Hulk's characterization. Then you have Shuri, who, while yes, has an arc and goes through change, it's very confusing. For context, Black Panther Wakanda Forever starts off with T'Challa dying of an unknown illness. We see Shuri frantically trying to recreate the heart-shaped herb that was destroyed in the first movie in hopes to save her brother's life. Unfortunately, she was too late. So it looks like Shuri's arc could be about her finally processing and eventually mourning T'Challa's death. But we are never shown that as something Shuri has to overcome. Maybe a couple scenes here and there, but nothing that is shown to define her and her decision making. Okay, well, we are also shown Shuri's conflict with the traditional culture of Wakanda.
What about recreating the heart-shaped egg? We do not need the herb, Mother. We need new technology.
What of the Black Panther? The mantle has unified our nation for centuries.
The Black Panther is a relic, Mother.
But by the end, she is still dismissive of Wakanda's traditions, as shown by her not taking up the role of queen after her mother's death in this movie. The only traditional thing she did was the burning of the robes for T'Challa that she didn't want to do at the start of the movie, and that seems like it was just done more because the creators thought it would be a good place to put a tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace. But do you see what I mean? None of these characters are developed, and it makes them all so bland and forgettable as a result. The only ones that actually go through an arc are Moon Knight from, Moon Knight, Kamala Khan from Ms. Marvel, and John Walker from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But even then, Moon Knight is pretty disconnected from the rest of the MCU, so the character isn't exactly helping to build this new foundation for it going forward. And as much as I like Kamala and the Ms. Marvel series as a whole, they should have spent some more time than what they did with the main conflict in Kamala's story, being her relationship with her family and how her eccentric personality leads to her feeling disconnected from them, as well as just questioning her own future. However, John Walker is actually the perfect example of how to add a new character into the MCU and make them interesting. For context, in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam ends up giving the Captain America shield to the US government, even though in Endgame it was pretty definitive that he accepted it from Steve, and the show never gave a good enough reason on why he doubled back on his decision, but that is besides the point. Bottom line, the government now has the shield, and has decided to hire their own Captain America. Enter John Walker, who on paper seems to be a perfect fit. Military trained, highly decorated, and more than willing to lay down his life to protect his comrades, much to Bucky's annoyance.
You ever jump on top of a grenade?
Yeah, actually I have 4 times. It's a thing I do with my helmet. It's a reinforced helmet. It's a long story.
Stupid. Now, John is never shown to have any malicious intent when taking up the mantle. He is actually extremely aware of the huge shoes he has to fill, and it requires support from his friends and family. Unfortunately, this idea of filling Steve's shoes is inevitably what leads to him buckling under the pressure. Steve was never trying to be a symbol, rather just be the best person he could be. This is why Steve was often at odds with organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D. He always did what he thought was right, while Walker tried to be what he felt like others wanted to see out of Captain America. Which is what eventually leads to him not just losing the shield, but also his best friend. It isn't until he's faced with a choice to stop his best friend's killer or saving a bus full of people to where he's reminded on why he wanted to be Captain America in the first place.
Everybody in the world expects me to be something, and I don't want to fail them.
You see, this is an arc. This is a character with flaws and struggles that he strives to overcome. Seriously, John Walker is probably the best character in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I just wish that the other newbies were written just as well, as if that was the case, then the future of the MCU will be looking a lot brighter than what it is now.
Well, this sucks.
You wanna know what doesn't suck? Is this video sponsor, me, and my Patreon. That's right, I finally made a Patreon for any of you guys that may want to support me outside of just watching my content. I'm going to be keeping it as up-to-date as possible to hopefully make it worth your guys' while. So if that's something y'all are interested in, the link's in the description. Check it out, see if you like it, and if you do, like I said, I'll try to make it worth your while. Anyway, back to the video. However, even with the need to destroy the past, even with not making a character more interesting than a brick, and even with the fact that She-Hulk is a crime against humanity, seriously writers, were you even trying? The biggest problem with Phase 4 that not only defeats the point of a cinematic universe, but also cripples Phase 5 more than a participant in the Special Olympics, is that Marvel had no direction.
Stop acting like you know the way ahead, like you know the rules. There are no rules, man. We're lost.
One of the best things about the Infinity Saga is that it always felt like they were moving towards something, getting together the Avengers, setting up the Infinity Stones, and teasing Thanos. While each movie told its own story, it always felt as if there was something always happening within the broader world of the MCU. Now, I have no clue what Phase 4 was building towards. Everything feels so separated and generally lost on where to go. Yeah, we got set up for Kang the Conqueror and Loki, but there was also set up for a mystery behind where the 10 rings came from, Thanos' brother, and mutants, all of which are plotlines that could connect with the Avengers. But the problem is, throughout all of Phase 4, Marvel couldn't stick to one thing that would connect all these movies and shows together. Sure, now with Ant-Man 3, it's confirmed that we're heading towards a multiversal war with Kang as the big bad. But the thing is, Kang f***ing sucks! For context, in Ant-Man 3, we are met with a version of Kang who has been exiled by the other Kangs of the multiverse to the quantum realm. He tries to escape with the help of Janet Van Dyne, but once she finds out about the massacres he has committed, she uses the Pym particles to embiggen his ship's core, making it useless. But when Scott and the gang find themselves in the quantum realm, Kang finally sees his opportunity to escape. Now, there are two actions that Kang takes that makes me question if he was on several hallucinogens that could compromise his cognitive function. The first one being after Kang captures Scott and Cassie. For context, Kang needs Scott to shrink down in order to get back his ship's core, and if he doesn't, he will kill Cassie. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, let's break down this plan. Kang clearly needs the Pym particles to not just shrink down to the right size, but also shrink down the core itself. But why does he need Scott? The movie said it's because that going that small can break your mind, but why not just send someone smarter than Scott like MODOK or an android? I mean, you have pretty much complete rule over the quantum realm and was able to create this massive technological fortress. You're telling me you can't make something or train someone to be able to make the trip? But that leads to a follow-up question that I have for the Conqueror, who has killed several Avengers and worked closely with Janet when he first arrived. Why didn't you try to make your own Pym particles? Seriously, look at what Kang has created in the quantum realm. It is literally a whole-ass futuristic city, and you are telling me that the entire time you haven't been able to even come close to recreating shrinking technology? God, the only way this could be worse is if you have someone who works with you that literally did that exact thing. You're gonna show a clip, aren't you?
Surprised to see me?
Darren?
Yeah, in this movie, MODOK is actually Darren Cross, previously known as Yellow Jacket. He's been stuck in the quantum realm since the first Ant-Man film, and is basically Kang's right-hand man. And in his first appearance, Darren literally replicated the Pym particles himself. You're telling me y'all haven't been able to, or even attempt to make your own Walmart version when you were given such a head start? Are you kidding me?
Did you all take stupid pills this morning?
Oh, and get a load of this. You want to know how Kang is defeated? You want to know? By goddamn ants. This is a joke. Keep in mind, in this movie, Kang's suit has been established that it can disintegrate people. But for some reason, that makes sticking a fork into a toaster seem like a logical decision. He doesn't use it while fighting the ants. They weren't broken, they weren't out of reach. Nope, Kang just refused to use them.
You can't be this stupid! You can't!
This is our villain. This is the big bad that is supposed to be an Avengers level threat. A character who not only is strategically stupid, but also became vulnerable enough to die thanks to f***ing ants. With Thanos, there was so much buildup before we even saw him in action in Infinity War. He was established as the ultimate big bad and lived up to the hype. His actions were consistent, he had a clear goal in mind, and from his first scene in Infinity War, the MCU re-established that Thanos is the ultimate threat. Meanwhile, Kang is so unintimidating, I am convinced Wanda's fake children could beat his ass. It doesn't matter what version of Kang we get going forward. After seeing him die twice, yeah, he died to Loki too, I, and I'm sure many others, just can't take him seriously going forward. So let's recap. Phase 4 has not only ruined several legacy characters, not only has it tried to rewrite the history of the MCU at least 15 times, not only are all its new characters blander than a loaf of bread, but it also had less direction of where to go than a blind man on a motorcycle. Look, there's no denying that after Endgame, the future of the MCU was really up in the air. But never would I have imagined it could have gotten this bad. It's like all Marvel's trying to do is create a metric crap ton of new characters in this universe, rather than developing just a handful for the future. Marvel has introduced over 25 major characters in Phase 4 alone. How in the mother of ass do you expect to develop all of these without having a new project every 2 months? And look, I also understand that many of these movies and shows had to get either shifted around, delayed, and some even rewritten due to the phase starting during the pandemic. However, what should have happened was Marvel and Kevin Feige get everyone into a meeting and basically say, hey, we are not leaving this room until we know what we are building towards. Phase 4 was the first group of Marvel movies that really didn't feel like they were a part of the cinematic universe. But even if they were, most of the shows or movies suck so much monkey scrotum that the cops have a warrant out for sexual misconduct. Assassinated Wanda's character. Trash. Completely eviscerates the MCU. Assassinated Natasha. Don't give a f*** and don't pretend like you do either. Villain is brain dead. Boring as sin. Decent, but what the hell was that ending? Flawed but fun. Asked more questions than it answered. Next to no character development with a confusing theme. This one's actually not that bad. Dear f***, this is the worst movie. And Suck Me Sideways, this is the worst show. Honestly, I haven't seen this one. Put my ass to sleep in the theaters and barely developed Shuri. James Gunn is our Lord and Savior. And here's a bonus round of go f*** yourself. This movie had no direction, no character development, and made the new big bad of the universe look like a punk ass bitch. Saying that the future of the MCU is rocky is more obvious of a statement than saying that water is wet or that I read at a 3rd grade level. It's just a damn shame how far Marvel has fallen, and if Ant-Man 3 is any indication of how Phase 5 is gonna go, by the time it's over, the bar of these movies are going to be in hell. Marvel is slowly destroying the MCU, and all we can do is hope they can see what they're doing before it's too late. God, I need a damn break. Anyway, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comment section down below. What y'all think of Phase 4 of Marvel? The MCU Phase 4, man, it put me through the goddamn ringer. It really did. Watching all this stuff back to back, it was painful. Video took quite a bit of time. It was really crunched towards the end because this past weekend was pretty busy, but it's done. It's over with. I wanted to get it done definitely by today because y'all know I gotta work on next. Y'all know what I have to start working on next. The final Flash season video. May not be my final Flash video, but it's gonna be my final Flash season breakdown. So I want it to be big. I want it to be so well put together. So I gotta start writing the script and getting it all ready as soon as humanly possible. Just so once the series ends, it will be pretty close to done. Anyway, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Guys liked it and you're new to the channel, hit that like and the subscribe button. Also, didn't the channel's potential? Hit the same buttons. Anyway, my name is G.I.Gio. I have to get all this stuff done, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.